Jared, thank you so much for being on the Girls on Games podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is thrilling for me. I've read the site for some time, and I recently got turned on to the podcast, and have really enjoyed what you do here. When you reached out on Twitter, I was so happy.
I'm a little starstruck. That happened when I was on Twitter, when I was tweeting at you, and I was like, oh my God, this needs to happen. We need to get Jared on the episode. It'll be sweet.
Well, vice versa. When I saw your name, I was like, oh, this is exciting. So, and when you agreed to come on Red Dead Radio, that made me happy too. So I enjoy exchanges of happy people.
Yes.
And laughter and talking about games and being excited. That's kind of my MO. So pretty thrilled about this.
Oh, I appreciate that, and that's the thing. When I saw that you were coming back to Kind of Funny, I was like, yes, this is excellent. I need Jared's positivity. I need his outlook on life. I need his energy about video games, because the way you come at video game writing and commentary is with such eloquence that and happiness and just joy. I'm like, yes, I need more of that, because we get too much into the trash when it comes to video games and talking on it, and people have so much hate all the time and anger. I'm like, no, we do it because we love video games.
Well, plenty of things about the medium drive me crazy, and I certainly do get angry, irritated, frustrated, and there's plenty of games I hate. But I do overall, I love the art form. I mean, video games are in a they're in that wonderful phase right now where they're still in their infancy, and we get to be here for it. We get to see the golden age of Hollywood take shape all around us in this art form, and it's an exciting thing. And I think trying to be able to appreciate the best parts of that when they're going on, it's a rare gift. We're not going to have this forever. And I've been really privileged. The time I was born allowed me to kind of walk in. I was old enough to remember and understand just how exciting arcades were at their zenith, and really to follow this medium from that period of time on. I've gotten to see most of what we think of as the arc of popular gaming when it became a pop culture explosion. And so that's really influenced the way I look at it, and given me a little bit of license, I think, to try to keep a positive spin and some perspective on where it's headed. But yeah, I mean, there's tons of horror out there, and when things are awful, they should be called out. But I do want to try to present some enthusiasm and maybe a little critical appreciation for where we've come from and where we're going.
Yeah, and I think that's what actually makes video games the art form. Did my master's in graphic design, sat through a art criticism class, and it's learning that idea that criticism doesn't mean negative, right?
Yeah, it means appreciating.
Right.
It means context
Exactly.
more than anything else. I think criticism is about contextualizing and helping to understand why something matters. Dan Stapleton, have you ever spoken with him, Leah?
No, I haven't, but listen to him.
Okay, well, Dan's the reviews editor at IGN, and he'll drive you nuts, because he'll edit your review 7 ways from Sunday. Dan is a prolific editor and very good at what he does. But Dan's always harping the way he says, no, what I want you to tell me if the game is good and why the game is good. Tell me why I want to play this. Don't tell me what it is. Tell me why it's good. And that element of criticism that was a lesson that was well learned and well appreciated at the time that he kind of literally stuffed it down my throat with his very long arms.
No, I think he's right on the money, because even when we were doing art school, they were like, okay, you can't just tell me why you like it. You can't just tell me you like it. You need to tell me why. Or why it doesn't work. And you need to make it so it's constructive, so that there's a reason. And that's something that I've even passed on when I'm dealing with my team and things. Like, you can't just say, oh, well, I hate this game. Oh, well, I hate this project. You have to say what they can do to help them move forward, to make it better, to fix things.
Oh, that's cool. That's very, very good. Who's a critic you enjoy reading or listening to?
Oh, my goodness gracious.
Who's someone
well, besides yourself,
that's kind
actually,
of
I listen to a lot of the Kind of Funny crew. I really like Colin Moriarty as well, and I like Brian Altano as well. I like his perspective on things.
Two sharp folks right there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you bring up Kind of Funny, because we exist at kind of a weird nexus of entertainment and criticism.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not a journalist. I don't think any of us. Greg has been a journalist. Certainly, he was a real, honest goodness, newspaper reporter. But what we do now is this kind of weird meeting place of criticism and entertainment. We're there to make people's days happier. We're there to be their friends, to get to know them and give them kind of a window into the best parts of our lives. But we also want them to know why we enjoy what we do, and occasionally to warn them away. There's a guy that used to write for 1UP named Scott Sharkey, who said once that one of the weird things about working in this industry, and you know this well, Leah, having been in it, is that sometimes when you're reviewing a game, you're literally sitting next to the guy who made it. That you're at an event, and this person is someone you've gotten to know. You've had drinks with them. You've had dinner with them. You may be friends with them. And they've just spent the last 3 years of their life working on this piece of art. And now they're sitting next to you, their hand on your shoulder, pointing, go, yeah, look at that. Did you see that? And you sit there and you play the game. And then you got to go home and honestly tell people what you really think of it. And he talked about that difficulty, and he said, what I try to do to keep myself integral in this is I think about that guy on one side, but then I imagine 8-year-old me,
Mm-hmm.
8-year-old myself, having mowed lawns all summer to save $60 for this game I've been seeing commercials for and reading about in magazines and watched my E3 press conference. And I said, and I'm about to go buy it, and I pop up to oneup.com and I see this review. He said, I owe that kid what I really think. That's my audience. That's who I have to remember when I'm writing a review. And I thought that was rather profound and powerful what it said there, because that is ultimately what we're trying to do, is make life happier for everybody. And, that guy that made the good game or the bad game, everybody's trying to make a good game for the most part, but it didn't always work out that way. And when it doesn't, that doesn't mean that person was malevolent in making mistakes or being forced to an impossible situation by a publisher or a schedule. But ultimately, you gotta try to let people know what you really think. That was by the way, I can always be trusted to ramble, Leah. So,
I love it.
Thank you. That's kind of you.
It's fascinating that duality, because we were talking just prior to the podcast. It's like some of these folks that you've seen at events so many times now, the press, the normal, especially here in Montreal, we've got so many different video game companies, but their PR people become our friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the scene is so small at the same time. It's huge yet very tiny. And yeah, you feel like, oh, but if I say this, they're gonna be ticked off at me. But you gotta be honest. You gotta be true to yourself. You gotta be true to who's reading on the other end. You gotta understand that they trust you, and that's why they're coming back all the time, right?
Yeah, it's a small concentrated industry. It's not unlike, I brought up Hollywood before, but it's not unlike Hollywood. I mean, there's everybody knows everybody, and we're centered in a limited geographic area. You've got studios in Montreal and in some in New York, and here on the west coast of the United States, Japan. Emerging Chinese studios now, several prominent European cities that are hubs of development. But it's still, most of the video game development in the world that we think of as AAA is probably happening in 24 cities worldwide. And you get to know people really quickly. In that you live in Montreal, which is video game central. I mean, I don't know what else goes on in Montreal but making video games. You can't take right turns.
That's impressive that you remember that.
Yes, that was very strange. Don't turn right on red in Montreal.
Yeah, it's true. On the island.
On the island. When you're off the island, it's fine.
You're good.
Don't you dare on the island. Yeah.
Nope.
I don't get it either.
I've lived here for 15 years. I don't get it either.
But yeah, I mean, it's a constant, and everybody does know everybody. I worked on the publishing side, and so I've gone back to forth to back, and you do very quickly recognize folks. You see them at the same parties. You go to their birthdays, and I understand that's very hashtag collusion. If you're paranoid. I think what you have to do in that moment is try to understand that the people that are doing things on this end, people like you, are doing this because they love the medium and they want other people to have fun, and they're not easily going to forget that. I mean, I still, the people I go to when I want to know if a game is good or not are my old, IGN peeps for the most part. If I want to know what to play next, I go find Chloe Rad and just say, Chloe, what's good? And she'll tell me. I'll have never heard of it, and it'll be wonderful, and delightful. Or go to Miranda and just be like, hey, Miranda, what's good? She'll tell me, and it's not that much different. Where I understand my relationship with them is closer and I know them well, but for people that are reading or listening to or watching these shows, the opinions they're getting there are what people really think about these games, especially from a critical perspective, like I said. And of course we play up silliness. I only hate Banjo-Kazooie half as much as I pretend to.
That's like me and Star Fox Zero.
Oh, okay. Well, that's how much do you really hate it? Like,
I don't really hate it that much. It's just funny to laugh at it. And it's funny to laugh at PlayStation for not being able to change my name for how many years. But
that is
you live and you learn.
You live and you learn. I want to know, there's got to be a secret reason for that. I probably can't tell that story.
It's either they're trolling us or there's a real technical hiccup that they're like, the whole world will explode, right? In PlayStation world, right?
And there are ghosts in the machine like that sometimes things get put in code for weird reasons. 15 years ago. I'm sure if it were trivial, they would have done it a decade ago. There must be either a technical or a contracting or an internal political reason this doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's wild because you imagine like when the PlayStation Network came out, who would have thought that like my old J-pop name that I put in there because I was a fangirl of Ayumi Hamazaki like ended up was going to carry through until I was like in my mid 30s. Like,
yeah. You're tied and you're locked in.
Locked. Everything else can be branded properly with Girls on Games, but not my PlayStation ID. What can you do?
Same for me. And that's, one day maybe they're just waiting for the year they don't have any games to announce. Like that.
There you go.
They're holding in their back pocket.
And the whole world goes crazy at E3.
Yeah, Half-Life 3 confirmed, and you can change your PlayStation name.
The hell froze over.
Yeah, right there.
Let's talk about your love for video games because you just started a really awesome project called Hop, Blip, and a Jump.
I did. I did start that. I did a weird thing. I'm a middle-aged person. That actually I came into the video game industry fairly late. This was never the plan to work in games. It was
What was the plan?
The plan was I spent many years as a pastoral minister.
Wow.
I have a master's in theology. I'm a ordained minister. I worked in churches. I taught for a long time. That was going to be life: teaching, preaching, caring for people. That was going to be what I did. And then through a very strange set of circumstances, I ended up getting opportunities to write about games, which was something I did for fun while I was doing other stuff. And the opportunities just kept opening up. And when IGN just literally just called one day, I'd been cultivating the relationship for years, and had picked up a lot of freelance work with them. But I got a call one day. It's like, you want to move to San Francisco? And I was like, wow.
Where were you then?
I was in North Carolina at that point.
Oh, wow. Okay, all the way across country.
Yeah, I started writing about games when I was a school teacher in Japan. And my wife and I moved over there together because we wanted to have an adventure. And we lived there for close to 3 years, I guess.
Wow.
And it was a lot of fun. And we'd said I left ministry largely because it was hard on family in the little kinds of churches I worked in. It was effectively meant that my spouse had 2 jobs. Yeah, and was already working way too hard as a manager in social work, and then she came to that as well, and I was working too much, and I was being distracted from what was maybe really important in life in a lot of ways. And we got together and we're like, you know what, maybe this isn't the right thing to be doing right now. And so we went and taught. Anyway, I started writing freelance for fun for an English language magazine in Japan. That led to freelance writing for 1UP. That led to GameSpy. That led to IGN. And that led to full-time. Wow. And from there to EA, and then to Kind of Funny now. But all that said, Hop, Blip, and a Jump, I left my day job in publishing, decided I wanted to make things for a living. So Hop, Blip, and a Jump is a kind of a weird mix of diary, documentary, essay. I don't know what it is, but they're these short videos. They're only about 8-10 minutes long, using gameplay footage, carefully tailored gameplay footage. It's usually like 3-4 second cuts, so it takes a long time to make these episodes. And it's about life. It's about how video games reflect life and life reflects games. And that sounds really dull, but I promise it's not. The first episode is about the time I spent in a mental hospital last year and about how Mario helped get me out. And that sounds very silly, but it's a kind of, I think, an interesting story. And I've moved on from there. I've just about finished the next episode, which is about death. Because video games, more than maybe anything else in the world, are about death.
Very
How many
true.
people have you mowed down in video games, and how many times have you died in video games? I mean, if I count Civilization, I've killed billions.
As much about death as it is resurrection and learning from your mistakes.
Exactly, and that's very good. You're gonna like this episode.
I like the last three.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much, Leah. But yes, Hop, Flip, and a Jump, and then under that banner, that's kind of becoming a network. I also produce a weekly podcast called Red Dead Radio, the Red Dead Redemption podcast, which is all about RDR2, which is headed our way. I'm playing through Red Dead 1 right now. I have different guests on every week, a different Wild guest, because we can go straight to the Wild guest. We talk about the playthrough, we talk about Red Dead news, and we always talk, because Red Dead's such a cinematically influenced game, we end up spending a lot of the show talking about film, television, books, everything that's Western influenced or has gone into it, from Star Wars to samurai movies to Westworld, and all over the place. It's a lot of fun. And then we also discuss random topics. We have a curated random topic section every show, where we draw a card that's got a weird question on it from the community that has nothing to do with anything else on the show. And it's fun.
It's awesome. It's such a good podcast. I want to know, what inspired you to pick Red Dead Redemption to talk about? Because I could see this working for many different video games.
Well, it could. We did something similar a couple of times at IGN when I was there. But the reason I chose Red Dead is several-fold, primarily because it's the game coming up that I'm most excited about. It was a matter of passion and interest, honestly. Red Dead 1 blew me away. Very few games. It's Breath of the Wild. When I played it, I was like, this is the first thing since Red Dead that felt like Red Dead. I'm out in this big, beautiful, quiet world that seems designed for me to create my own stories, but is never boring. Creatively, visually stunning, diverse landscapes, unexpected things at every turn, a fantastic, solid story, wonderful writing. I decide the pace I want to approach it. And Red Dead 2 is being built not just on that experience and everything they learned from that, but also from what they learned from the truly state-of-the-art world building of GTA 5. Because Red Dead 2 really is the sequel to GTA 5 as much or more than it is to Red Dead 1. And that's going to mean a game that I think, looking at the preview materials, is going to change the way we think about open world gaming, kind of the way that God of War might have changed the way we're thinking about single player this year, or the way Breath of the Wild made us think about what's possible in a big open space. And that, combined with the fact that the online elements, the way that Rockstar supports them in GTA 5 with continual updates, they open up so many possibilities. I think there's going to be a lot to talk about for a long time. Plus, I have no trouble finding guests that want to talk about Red Dead or cowboy movies or any of that stuff. And so those things combined, there's a lot of community interest. I'm having a ball doing it, and frankly, it's turning out better than I thought it would. I mean, I thought it'd be okay, but when are we gonna get you on? I know you're coming on. We gotta get this locked into the calendar.
We gotta either figure out how to do it on distance, or I'm gonna have to come to San Francisco.
Well,
I was there last September, so maybe I should come back again.
Well, I mean, if you want to come back, that's great. But otherwise, we'll absolutely figure out how to do it.
Yeah, because you inspired me to go back, and I was listening through the podcast and inspired me. I was like, man, you're talking about, oh my God, what was it? Westworld. And then you were talking about Tombstone. I was like, when is he going to talk about Deadwood? Because Deadwood is like my be all end all. It's like, because I've always liked cowboy stuff because it gives me roots, like connection with my father, my grandfather, and old Louis L'Amour books and all that kind of stuff. And then the writing in that is so eloquent, and they swear so much.
The profanities in Deadwood are top tier.
It's amazing.
They are. Deadwood is great television. The fact that it didn't get an ending
so
hurts
sad.
my soul. It's like a sliver of ice in my heart.
Yeah.
It is everything that is best in television, meaning everything that is worst in television, because you're never going to get it. It's not like Samurai Jack where they're going to come back, 10 years later and give you your ending. That's not going to happen. They can't rope those people
Well,
in.
some of them have passed on. Like, oh my goodness, the other saloon guy, Booths. Oh
Powers
my goodness.
Booth?
Yes, he passed away.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, like, it's not like you can get him back, and he was like a perfect counterpart to Ian McShane. Like,
oh yeah, he was extraordinary. Yeah, you had Ian McShane, you had Timothy Oliphant, you had Powers Booth. Yeah, what a cast!
So many like nods to other stories, whether they be true or false, between like Wyatt Earp and Calamity Jane and all that kind of stuff. Anyways, we're not gonna steal your show here.
I don't mind.
I could talk about Western stuff for a long time.
People are here to hear you talk. You run a great show. I think your fans probably want to hear you talk about what you love.
Yeah, well, they hear about a fair amount when I talk about Red Dead on the show, because it's the thing that I do. And here's a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about this game, and I had this issue with Zelda as well, where I feel like at this point, I don't want to hear anything else. I don't want to look at any other footage. I don't want to, like, it's hard to talk about it because then people will be like, oh, did you hear about this, that, and the other thing? But I don't want to get spoiled. How do you handle that?
With GTA and Red Dead, I'm not worried. And the reason for that is very simple. I covered the GTA 5 beat at IGN. I was fairly new at IGN when GTA 5 was about to break. And GTA 5 was my beat. It was all I did for several months.
Wow.
That was my life. I slept at IGN writing GTA stuff. And one of the things I learned through that experience is that the way Rockstar approaches marketing, you don't have to worry about spoilers.
Good.
They are, and this is based on years of observation of their work. They're going to show you enough to make you interested, and they're going to spoil nothing. And they want to let the game speak for itself, and they're smart enough to understand how powerful that is and how that plays exactly into what we want, which is to see enticements and reasons to come in and then let us do all our own discovery, because their games are about discovery and they get that. So why ruin that? They get that about their stuff. So that's why I'm not worried about it in this. I'll watch everything. I'll read everything, because I firmly trust them not to give me more information than I want. That's my answer to that. I have not seen an instance of them doing that in any of their contemporary marketing. So I'd say Red Dead Radio is safe for you, and so are all the trailers and other things they choose to dump, because they're just going to tell you about features or tiny hooks in a vast narrative that are just going to make you want to go find out what's really happening.
But Red Dead Radio, I don't find that it ever gets to the point, because you're talking about all the things around the Western universe or that Western theme. Though you do talk about news and stuff, I never feel like I get to the point. You just give me enough of a nugget that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm excited about that. But then you talk about everything else, so it makes me think of things like, oh, maybe they'll put a reference to this in the game. Oh, maybe we'll get to go check out that part of a Western culture or something. It's just enough to get me hyped.
That's kind of what we're going for. That's what we're going for. Although this week we did have, we had our guest this week. This will go up Friday, so I guess this will be right before your show goes up Monday, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So the most recent episode is with John Ryan from IGN, who has seen the game in action.
Ooh.
And so we talked for like 90 minutes about the slice he saw. And it's a little off format for our normal show, because most of it really is just news. It's just him pouring out things he observed. But even that's not spoilers. It's just incredible observations about the world and stuff that he saw in this very carefully cultivated little piece they decided to show off. Also, we talk about RoboCop a lot. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah,
that's an interesting comparison. RoboCop is not something that I would have related to the tropes that cowboys have.
Neither did I until John Ryan brought it up, and he's like, "No, this is a sheriff movie. The town's in bad shape, and the new and the one lawman is gunned down, but then he comes back to town. It's practically a Pale Rider situation.
Wow.
The sheriff's back in town, and there's the corrupt governor up in his mansion that's making it all happen. And first he deals with the thugs and the hoods and all the guys that are parts of the all the the riff-raffy villains. He works his way up, and he finds out really it's the man that's behind it all. And he goes to the governor's house, and he throws him out the window, and he kills his big robot. And that's RoboCop.
Wow.
It
You're
kind of
right.
is a
It does
Western.
work.
It does, down to like spinning the gun. I mean, he learns how to spin and holster the. He's literally got like a 6-gun in his holster. He pulls out, and I was like, I would have never seen this in a million years, John. I was like, no, this is absolutely a Western.
Now I need to go back and watch that movie and see if they have some of the like telltale like shots that you get in a lot of old spaghetti westerns and stuff.
I wonder too. I think Paul Verhoeven. I mean, without being too overbearing here, without using too much hyperbole, RoboCop I think is truly a great film. And that may sound goofy, but I think it's the best work of satire in the history of movies. Paul Verhoeven somehow made a movie that is viciously satirical of practically every social norm of 1980s popular culture and a ridiculously entertaining action movie. I don't know how it does both at the same time, but it really does. And so it's a good movie to go back and watch again if you haven't in a long time. And at first you'd be like, what is this? And because it's ultra violent, it's very strange. But Verhoeven knows exactly what he's doing. And by the end, you've watched this kind of orgy of violence and destruction that also manages to poke really hard at everything from the way that a lot of American city culture is treated by people who live outside of cities, or the way that rich people very often are exploiting people to create crime, it's an extraordinary film.
Oh, now I'm gonna have to go back and watch RoboCop.
Yeah. Real good movie.
You mentioned that you recently left working at Electronic Arts.
Yeah.
What did you take from that experience after being from the editorial side before into working in games to now working on Hop, Blip, and a Jump? Like, what learnings did you take from that experience at Electronic Arts?
A lot of context. I've talked a lot about context, a lot of perspective. I worked with smart, great people. And when you work on the other side in press, you learn a lot, absolutely, because you spend a lot of time with developers and publishers and at studios, and you get to know that end. But it's very different. It helps you understand the way a lot of decisions are made. And it helps you understand that some things that sometimes seem nonsensical from one side actually have very, very good, well thought out reasons behind them, and helps you to understand that the motivations of the people around you are very often just so marvelously optimistic, and that the video game industry, it turns out, is full of people who love video games, and that you're just day in and day out. I spent time with human beings who wanted nothing better than to share something joyful with fans. And that was really, really cool. I also learned a lot about the structure of day-to-day nuts and bolts, how large game projects come together. And that context has deeply affected the way that I talk about and think about and write about games now. It's kind of like watching a whole bunch of movies and becoming a movie expert, and having spent time with the crew and been at shoots, and you really do understand some things about it. And then one day you go and you pick up a camera and you're part of the crew, and you shoot something, you shoot a film, and then you go back to being a critic again. And you've just learned the internal language of the thing. That was the best part of it for me, and it's provided eye-opening insight, I think, into why certain things sometimes have to happen the way they do, and other times how the choices that have to be made to put a project like that together. I mean, you're well acquainted with that end of things as well. Yeah, I'll never cease to be grateful for it. I really will.
It's great that you got the chance to do that. I always like seeing the inner workings of stuff too. And the do you think that it changed how you approached Hop, Blip, and a Jump?
Yeah, I do. I think that it gave me a broader, it expanded my language. Here I am searching for words, so obviously not too much, but I think it expanded my vocabulary of games. And I'm not talking about using big words in my script. I'm talking about that it opened my eyes up. The best analogy I can use is this. I spent most of my life in the United States. I'm a pretty smart guy, and I think a reasonably empathetic person, very curious. I like to learn. I like to read. I like to meet people. And I spent a lot of time excited about learning about the world. Then I went and lived in another country for several years.
Mm.
One of the things about living in another country I learned was that it exposes you to blind spots in your psyche that you never, ever would have fathomed you had if they weren't pointed out to you by day-to-day experience, even if you were looking for them. I was always looking to self-improve when I was home, and I did, but there were certain things about myself I simply couldn't have known until I lived in a place where everybody else did things a different way, because that's how they grew up, and that's where they were, and that's how their language or their culture or their education system worked. And suddenly I looked at this entirely new worldview on certain things I never, ever considered, and like, I've just been presupposing this my whole life. And once you start thinking that way, once that particular part of you, whatever the issue may be, broadens, you can never go back unless you willfully stuff your fingers in your ears and choose not to see or hear. And so when I came back to the States, it's deeply affected how I approach my life here ever since. It was like that. Covering games and loving them so much from one end, and then going and being a part of creating them. When I came out, I'm not sure how Blip and a Jump ever would have happened if I hadn't worked on the dev side or on the publisher side, because it really challenged me to say, what's important to me? What are these things really about? What does this all have to do for our lives? My life had changed so many ways during that time. And that context made me go, maybe I got a little bit to say about this that's different than what I've already seen, because there's great news and there's great reviews and great features and great previews and let's plays and streams, but I don't think a lot of people have done for games the kind of thing I'm trying to create with Hot Blip right now. And I think it's something worth doing. I believe in it enough that I made it my job, and it still remains to be seen financially whether that's going to work or not. But I think that development created the canvas on which I was going to paint that, if that doesn't sound too pretentious.
Not at all. I just keep like that concept of video games becoming art, and how we talk about art and break it down and analyze it, and how you've done that in the 3 videos to date. It's totally on the money. Like if you were to teach a class about video games and the importance of the medium and storytelling and character creation, and now once we see the next few, these could be each of them part a different session in a class.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating how you've managed to break it down, and not just you say like, oh well, you talk about the Mario Brothers for brothers in the episode about family, but like how the story of family is told in so many different ways. Like I forgot about Ori and the Blind Forest and that idea of parents, and like that part of that, the tissues that I needed during the beginning of that game, that got me, but I didn't think of it quite from the parent-child at the time, and you were able to bring that analogy to it, and it makes total sense.
Well, think about, you were talking about seeing that Ori beginning and reaching for the tissues, which is the same effect it had on me when I first saw it in the game. The thing about that's so compelling to me is that we haven't even met those characters. That scene is the first thing that happens in the game. It's almost entirely silent. It's only a few minutes long, and by the end, we're weeping. We're not weeping just because Ori's a cute little leaf man and his little pudgy friend died. We're weeping because even if we're not cognitive of it at the moment, it's saying something to us about the family we have and what that means. Those tears were coming from somewhere inside you, Leah, and it wasn't just the little leaf guy. I guess that's what I was trying to go for there.
Yeah, it drew me back to something else that happened in my past.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
And that's what games do. Their cries for help, their tears at loss, their screams at the sky, their jumping for joy. They are expressions of being a human being in a world that is far too often cruel and difficult and literally riddled with obstacles and ways to die and fall in a hole, just like a video game. And yet they're, like most great stories, they're expressing that reality and trying to teach us something through it. Most things that teach us things we already know. You ever notice that?
Very true.
Other than learning some equations and how to spell, we don't learn all that much in life. We just keep relearning it because we forget it. I was on a train the other day, and it was a commuter train full of Silicon Valley folk headed to their various engineering jobs, and everyone's sitting there with their laptops being very busy and important early in the morning. We're all sitting there being so busy and important. I'm sitting there with my phone and on this train that doesn't normally there are no children in San Francisco. I don't know where they hide them.
I noticed that when I was visiting.
It's a childless city. Everybody here works and drinks and complains, and it's kind of what we do. And nobody, it is really rare to see children here. And suddenly, from out of nowhere, this field trip, like approximately 700 children climb onto our train car. And looking around, just watching everybody around me get so obviously irritated by the presence of so much life and bounding joy and obnoxiousness and wonderfulness. It made me think, adults are afraid of kids because kids know something we don't know. They know what's possible. We've chosen to forget it, but they still know what's possible. And it's still possible for us. We just don't want to think about it anymore. But they haven't learned to forget yet. And I think that's why they annoy us so much.
They have different priorities at the minute.
They do, and they're plenty irritating. I mean, yeah, but there's something about that in games. So that's what I'm trying to do, and I hope people will check it out. I think it's a good project, and if you don't mind me shilling for a minute, I mean, this is how I live or die by Patreon at this point.
I was going to ask you to shout out your stuff. I just had one of the hard questions I wanted to ask you first.
Well, go for that.
Do you have a favorite game?
I do. Yeah, that one's an easy one for me. My all-time favorite video game is Sid Meier's Pirates.
Nice.
Yeah, the 1987 computer edition. My favorite is the 1990 port by Rare that was published by Ultra or Konami, and which I think is a great port of that particular version of the game. There have been remakes since, Pirates Gold and, of course, the Firaxis remake, both of which are excellent. But the original version and that Rare port particularly are, I think, slightly better. They're a little less BS-y in certain places, and although the ground combat does suck, I admit that as well as anyone. I just learned to game the system and went on anyway. But it's not the first open world game, but it may still be the best. It pioneered almost everything we appreciate about accessible open world gaming and sandboxing. It's just like Sid Meier made this vast world, filled it with interesting things to do, and created it in a way where you can enjoy that in no particular order. And it would be fun no matter what. And then he added enough variables that you could always switch that world up in a jillion different ways and approach it, and it would be a completely different game next time. And you made your own goals. I don't think Gone Home gets enough credit for it's a walking simulator, it's a great story, whatever. That game is one of the best examples of game design I've ever seen, level design. And House is designed in such a way in Gone Home that no matter what direction you choose to walk through it, because you can walk through it any way you want, no matter where you walk, it tells a compelling story. They don't move items around to pull that off. They don't change where anything is to make sure you hit them in a certain order. It is a place that's filled with literally hundreds of informative encounters that build a cohesive narrative, and no matter which way you go at it, that narrative is compelling and emotionally gratifying. I played Gone Home differently than a lot of people did because I found a secret passage within like the first 2 minutes. And so I'm playing from the basement up. And because of that, I'm finding things that are mysterious and weird. But I discovered that when I got upstairs to other places, stuff that other people may have encountered very early in the game, hitting it reverse, it had a different and a completely equally or greater powerful narrative punch in the gut. And I could approach it from any direction. Pirates doesn't have that narrative gravity, but it does. It's one of the earliest examples in games of somebody laying a bunch of stuff out in a world, and no matter which way you choose to go at it, it's going to make sense and be fun. And that's one of the things I really love about it.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's fun. It's just you play with a control pad and 2 buttons. I mean, some people played it with 1 button. It's the simplest imaginable control interface for a game that kind of looks like an RPG. Everything's arcade style. Yeah. There's a lot of resource management, but it's all menu driven. It's delightful. You sword fight and you have ship battles and you build a fleet and you conquer ports and you get married and you find your lost family and discover buried treasure and capture the treasure fleet and betray people and get chased by pirate hunters, and it's Black Flag but better.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, when I play Black Flag, I'm just like, I just want.
You already did this.
Yeah, well, I'm great. No, I just want this, but as good as Pirates. Black Flag was fun. I liked it.
So it was fun.
What's your favorite game, Leah?
Well, I actually recently did a flip. It was Ocarina of Time.
Okay.
Because that game is awesome, but also because of the context that I played it and how I played it. So I played it with my brother and one of my good friends at the time, who actually now works in video games. And the 3 of us played it and passed the controller back and forth. And
that's so cool.
I remember that often more than actually playing the game. So
just the social experience of being there with the people you love doing
exactly. And but then that has quickly been overcome by Breath of the Wild, and it's mostly because it broke my whole conceptual thought of how do you even approach a video game. I'm so used to doing things methodically and by the book and all this kind of stuff and being like, okay, point A, point B, go through everything, and then thinking about puzzles where they thought about puzzles a whole different way and thought about, well, if you need electricity and you got to make a current, well, you got a sword on your back. You know, like, who would have thunk of that?
Yes, the systemic brilliance. That part. It is side quest the game. I mean, it's a giant side quest. There's nothing required in that game but the plateau and the end.
And usually I get overcome by completionist stuff where I just want to, finish every piece of the map before I move on. This lets you do that at your own fruition, and also you don't have to worry about just going off and exploring. You'll find something no matter where you go.
Oh yeah, that was the first time you stumble on a dragon as majestic as Mai was. That was.
I was like, what? What is that in the sky? What?
Yeah. And then the quiet music and that beauty and just what in the world is happening here? I had this amazing thing. I know they set it up this way, but the second time I found one, I was standing next to that fountain. It was nighttime and beautiful, and I was just standing next to a fountain that I just climbed up a hill, and the dragon just comes out of the fountain 10 feet away from me. I mean, he just pops out of it. And he's coming out of the earth, and he's the size of the Empire State Building next to me, and I'm just watching this thing going, what? It was the most wonderful moment.
And then after finishing that game, I laid it down, and I couldn't touch anything for a week.
Yeah,
I didn't know what to do with myself.
I mean, what do? You have those moments, and I think it's good to be grateful for them. Again, Red Dead 2 is the first open world game that I think is going to be able to challenge some of the expectations that I said. It'll be a different kind of game because they're storytellers. There's going to be a story in this, but I do think that it'll, for the niche that it fills up, it's going to be pretty darn interesting as well. But yeah, I do. Breath of the Wild was pivotal. It was one of those before and after moments in video gaming.
And you knew it when you finished it. You were like, okay, everything's going to be based off this, and this is going to be the game changer. This is where we flip into something totally different in games.
Yep.
Wild.
I'm okay with that.
Me too. Jared, thank you so much. I could continue this conversation forever, but I know I don't want to keep you. You probably have things to do. But before you run away, you need
That's
to plug
okay.
all your stuff so that
Sure,
people can go and consume all this amazing content you're doing.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Well, if you want to listen to Red Dead Radio, you can do that on iTunes, Google Play, Pocket Cast, just about anywhere you can listen to a podcast. iHeartRadio, I would dare say.
Yay!
You can just search for Red Dead Radio, the Red Dead Redemption podcast there. You can also just go to reddeadradio.com, which will take us to the Patreon, and that'll point you to it as well. Hot Blip and a Jump is on my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Hot Blip and a Jump, or just search for Hot Blip and a Jump. And again, Hot Blip Jump or hotblipandajump.com just takes you to the Patreon where all that's linked to as well. I run a little show called Pockets Full of Soup that I do every now and then, which is a storytelling show about the people we're thankful for. I don't do that too often anymore, but it's something it's kind of a passion project, so I go back to it every now and then. And you can find that at pocketsfullsoup.com. And finally, if you want to back me financially, any of those sites I said, reddeadradio.com, hotblipjump.com, or just patreon.com/Jared Petty, they all take you to the same place. And that's where I am. That's how I pay the bills. So if you like what I do, please hop over there. You can find me hosting Kind of Funny Games daily, occasionally, and co-hosting the Kind of Funny Games cast with Greg Miller, Tim Geddes, Nick Scarpino, and that whole wonderful jackass circus over there. And occasionally you'll see my writing on IGN.com. I publish things every now and then because they're nice and let me. Also coming up at E3, keep your eyes out. I'll have some announcements on my Twitter soon at Petty, Jared. This is a long plug, sorry, but
keep going.
You'll be able to see me doing some fun stuff at E3. If you like what I make, I think you'll enjoy, and something a little different than I've done before. I haven't done what I'm about to do there, and I can't announce it yet. So, but yeah.
All right, I'll keep my eye on the Twitters for that because I will be retweeting that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's gonna be a fun thing. I'm really looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you, Jared. It's been awesome. I'm so happy to have you on the show, and keep doing what you're doing because it's awesome.
You make good things, Leah. Please keep doing what you're doing as well, and best of luck moving forward. What you do here is, you make a good thing that brings joy to people's lives, that informs, that makes me happy when I listen to it, makes me happy when I read it, and I really appreciate that. The fact that you've chosen to dedicate so much of your time to that. It's good stuff. Everybody here already knows that, but I'll try to remind other folks.
Thank you. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this highlight from the Girls on Games podcast, you can go subscribe to our show where most podcasts can be found, or find all of our content at girlsongames.ca.